What if the scandal wasn't real, but the humiliation was? That's the question burning through every social feed, podcast echo chamber, and late-night comedy room. Because what went down on that Saturday Night Live stage wasn't just a monologue. It was a metaphorical execution. The Duchess of Sussex wasn't in the building, but her name echoed louder than the opening applause. And the damage? Oh, it was surgical. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. We begin not with fact, but with performance. Not with evidence, but with spectacle. And the spectacle? It revolved around one woman, a handful of weaponized images, and a joke that may go down in television history as the line that broke the Duchess. The photos were never real. The affair never happened. But the consequences? Brutally authentic. So how did we get here? Let's rewind. Rewind past the standing ovation, past the rehearsals, past the alleged Yacht Girl photo drops that lit Twitter on fire, past the angry PR emails, the ghost-written denial letters, and the rage behind royal gates. Let's rewind to a moment before America's most biting comic, Colin Jost, decided to light a match and toss it directly at the myth of Meghan Markle. But first, ask yourself something. Why do we care so much when royalty and comedy collide? Why do we cling to the idea that behind palace walls lies betrayal, scandal, and forbidden secrets? Is it because we want truth? Or is it because we crave a public downfall? This isn't a story about what's true. This is a story about what people wanted to be true and how one man in a tailored suit turned the crowd into co-conspirators. Because what unfolded wasn't just another tabloid headline. It was a meticulously constructed takedown. And it left Meghan gasping behind the scenes, if the insiders are to be believed. But you'll have to wait for that. Let's first talk about the moment everything changed. It began with a dress rehearsal, a table read, a sigh, a suggestion. What if we went there? And once there was mentioned, there was no going back. Why now? Why this story matters. Now you might be wondering, why does this matter now? After all, Meghan and Harry have been in the headlines nonstop for years. Their Netflix deals, their Spotify exits, their podcast detours, their shifting relationship with the crown. We've seen it all. But what we haven't seen, at least not like this, is what happens when someone outside the royal sphere weaponizes the myth against them. No palace, no protocol, no press officers to clean it up. Just jokes. And a punchline designed to shatter the very image the Duchess has fought to protect. What's more, it happened live, with millions watching. And buried underneath it all, a reference to Meghan's disgraced uncle, a man who in this fictional narrative had been stripped of all his titles and allegedly became the subject of an unthinkable rumor, a secret affair. Unfounded. Absolutely. Absurd? Without question. But damaging? Oh, you have no idea. Because here's the catch. You don't need facts to burn a reputation anymore. You just need a meme, a monologue, and someone willing to say the unsayable with a wink. Colin Jost didn't just say it. He performed it. What we'll unpack together. Over the next hour, we'll dissect the anatomy of a media takedown wrapped in comedy. We'll peel back the curtain on how a single sketch ignited global outrage. We'll walk you through how Yacht Girl became the coded phrase of online smear campaigns. We'll explore the role of Prince Andrew, the real-life disgraced Duke, whose downfall was very real, but whose connection to this fictional scandal was deliberately fabricated in whispers, jokes, and weaponized rumors. You'll hear about the infamous rehearsal room meltdown, the off-camera reactions, the denied legal threats, and the final moment, the punchline heard round the world that left Meghan's team scrambling for damage control. And no, this isn't about proving a rumor true. This is about understanding the machine that makes the rumor matter more than the truth ever could. Because in 2025, the new royal war isn't fought with tabloids. It's fought with punchlines and pixels. But let's be clear about one thing. Before we dive in, a disclaimer. Every part of this expose is presented as a dramatized media narrative, grounded in recognizable headlines, but constructed for commentary and entertainment. The photos? Fabricated in story. The affair? A narrative device. The meltdown? Fictionalized from the storm of press chaos. The scandal? Manufactured. Amplified. Then swallowed whole by a media culture obsessed with takedowns and tragedy. Because we live in a world where the headline, Duchess breaks down over yacht photo leak, gets more clicks than any royal charity ever will. That's the world Colin Jost stepped into. And what he did next? It crossed a line no SNL host had dared before. The pre-show whispers, what we know and what we don't. The whispers started 3 days before the show. An anonymous account on social media began teasing yacht photos about to drop. The captions were vague. The images were blurred. But the implication was obvious. Comments exploded with fire emojis, popcorn gifs, and that one emoji that says, you know exactly what this is. But here's the twist. There were no yacht photos. Not real ones. Only cleverly doctored ones. Some AI enhanced. Others entirely constructed. And they weren't leaked. They were written into a comedy sketch. A sketch that didn't make it past rehearsal. Because what replaced it was even more brutal. A single-line zinger that would do more damage than any fake photo ever could. A royal setup with a comedic payoff. This wasn't just comedy. It was demolition dressed in irony. Because what better stage to destroy a reputation than the one that helped launch Tina Fey, Bill Murray, Eddie Murphy? SNL is sacred ground for satire. But this wasn't satire. This was something else entirely. A brutal, pinpoint assault disguised as comedy. One line, one reveal. One name, Andrew. And suddenly, the crowd wasn't laughing anymore. They were gasping. Because whether the rumor was real or not didn't matter. It had been said. And once said, it became its own truth. Why Meghan couldn't laugh it off? Here's the emotional twist. Meghan had always embraced Hollywood. She liked satire, until she became its punchline. When she was roasting others in interviews, it was playful. When she told Oprah her truth, it was powerful. But when she was the one being roasted, it was war. According to insiders close to the show's fictionalized version of the night, Meghan's team was livid. Emails were sent. Phone calls placed. There were rumors, unconfirmed, that Harry personally contacted someone at NBC. But it didn't matter, because the clip had already gone viral. And Meghan? She was trending for all the wrong reasons. A culture obsessed with collapse. So ask yourself, why do we enjoy watching icons fall? Is it envy? Is it justice? Is it that small voice inside us that says, see, even she's not perfect? Meghan built her image on survival, reinvention, and royal resistance. But SNL didn't care about that. They didn't want her story. They wanted her scandal. And they got it. Or at least, they created just enough illusion to make the world believe they did. What comes next? But just when the storm should have passed, just when Meghan should have laid low, something else surfaced. A second set of fictionalized photos. A second punchline in the next episode. A second name, one no one expected to hear again. Because while Meghan tried to silence the story, the world's attention turned to someone else. The disgraced royal uncle stripped of all titles. A man long buried by the firm. Now pulled back into the spotlight, not by palace decree, but by the comedic wrath of an SNL host with nothing left to lose. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It began with laughter, but not the good kind, the kind that echoes in a room, unites strangers, breaks tension. No, this was different. This was the kind of laughter that slices, that turns joy into embarrassment. That doesn't just make people laugh at someone. It makes them forget they were ever rooting for them in the first place. So, have you ever laughed so hard it ended someone's career? Because in Studio 8H that night, under the glowing lights and vintage cameras, with cue cards flipping and the band vamping in the background, something seismic was about to happen. And it would begin not with a scream, not with a scandal, but with a joke. A joke no one expected. A joke that, once heard, could never be unheard. But to understand the gravity of that moment, you have to understand the man behind it, Colin Jost. He's not what you expect. To the average viewer, he's the handsome, deadpan co-anchor of Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live. Ivy League polished, married to Scarlett Johansson. A little too clean-cut to be dangerous. But behind that square jaw and boy-next-door energy, there's a savage sense of humor. One with teeth. Colin didn't just land on SNL by accident. He fought for his place, wrote some of the most cutting jokes of the last decade. He's the kind of guy who can roast a sitting politician with a smile and make it sound like he's just reading the weather. Disarming, precise. And lately, he'd been watching the headlines. The Netflix docuseries. The Spotify fallout. The Vanity Fair interviews, the stage paparazzi shots, the rise and fall and rise again of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry had become a global media obsession. And Colin had questions. Why were we still pretending this wasn't entertainment? Why were we all still playing along? And then came the writers' room meeting. Tuesday afternoon, 3:17 p.m. Jost walked in late, coffee in hand. The room was already buzzing. Jokes flying. Pitches bouncing off the walls. A fake skit about King Charles as a Marvel villain. A bit where Harry becomes a California wellness influencer. Then someone threw out a line. What if Meghan had a yacht phase? The room went still, because everyone knew what that meant. The yacht girl rumor. The ancient, viral online conspiracy theory that Meghan had once been part of a luxury yachting circuit. A baseless, salacious whisper campaign that had followed her since the early days of dating Harry. Never proven. Always denied. But never really buried either. Someone snorted. Another chuckled. Then someone said, that'll get us canceled. But Colin? He leaned forward. Not laughing. Just thinking. Maybe it's not about the photos, he said. Maybe it's about the fact we all believe they could exist. What does that say about us? There was silence. A pause too long for a comedy room. And that was when he had them. It wasn't about attacking Meghan. It was about the phenomenon around her. The palace. The machine. The myth. And most importantly, the public's hunger for scandal. Because comedy, at its best, reveals truth. And this was ripe for a reckoning. But not everyone was on board. NBC's legal team flagged the script within hours. Too risky, they said. Unfounded rumors. Could be defamatory. Too close to real scandals involving other royals. They weren't wrong. Just 1 week earlier, Prince Andrew had been back in the news. The British Parliament had voted to officially strip him of all remaining royal titles and privileges. No HRH. No duties. No public-facing role. It was the final nail in the coffin of his royal life. And to combine that with a Meghan sketch? Too hot to touch. Too radioactive to air. So the sketch was scrapped. Or so everyone thought. What happened instead was worse. Colin didn't perform a sketch. He told a story. And stories, when delivered with just enough truth to feel real and just enough distance to claim satire, they're more dangerous than any parody. Because the joke that aired wasn't printed in the official cue cards. It was slipped in during the live taping. One line. Mid-monologue. Casual, but dripping with venom. Colin had been riffing on celebrity memoirs. Harry's book, Spare, had just been eclipsed by Britney Spears. And then, without missing a beat, he looked into the camera and said, I'm just saying, if I had a yacht phase and an uncle named Andrew, I'd probably move to California too. The studio didn't laugh. It gasped. Somewhere backstage, someone dropped their coffee. At home, Twitter exploded. It was a double hit. A nuclear combo. The first part. An obvious reference to the long-whispered, yacht girl rumors about Meghan. The second, an unmistakable jab at Prince Andrew, whose disgrace was not fiction, but grim reality. But when you paired those two elements in one punchline, it wasn't just controversial. It was weaponized. And it was then, in that moment, that Meghan's name stopped trending for what she said and started trending for what someone else said about her. Which raises a bigger question. Why do people believe the worst so quickly? Because deep down, we're wired for stories. We love narratives with villains and heroes, redemption arcs and shocking betrayals. Meghan had spent years painting herself as the misunderstood heroine, caught between palace cruelty and press brutality. But the second someone flips the script, the second someone dares to reframe her as the antagonist, the world listens. They lean in, and they laugh. Not because it's true, but because it feels like it could be. Now here's the contradiction that stings the most. Meghan and Harry have long insisted they left royal life for privacy, peace, healing. And yet, every year, they re-enter the spotlight. A docuseries here, an interview there, a podcast with Spotify, a memoir, a children's book, a documentary about polar bears, another podcast, another brand partnership, a red carpet appearance, a foundation gala. And the public? They start to wonder. Are they running from the spotlight or running on it? That contradiction is where the comedy lives. Colin didn't invent that contradiction. He exploited it. Brilliantly. Ruthlessly. And Meghan knew it. By Sunday morning, her name had been mentioned in over 1.7 million tweets. Colin Jost's monologue had been clipped, edited, subtitled, and shared across TikTok, Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube. Some called it the joke of the decade. Others called it a disgusting smear. One royal reporter said it blurred the line between satire and slander so effectively that it set a new precedent for American commentary on the royals. But one thing was clear. The Duchess was not amused. Sources close to her team claimed she was furious, shaken, that she'd called it a targeted character assassination wrapped in sarcasm. Harry, reportedly, was even more enraged. One tabloid claimed he threw his phone across the room after watching it. But neither of them made a public statement. They didn't have to, because the real damage wasn't in what was said, it was in what the public chose to believe after it was said. And the fallout? Oh, it was only just beginning. It wasn't the joke that lit the match. It was what followed. The moment Colin Jost uttered the words Yacht phase and uncle named Andrew, a million tabs opened across the internet. Reddit threads reawakened. TikTok sleuths scrambled to dig through digital archives. And in dark corners of the web where conspiracy and celebrity obsession merge, something started to bubble. People wanted proof. Any proof. And that's where things got dangerous. Because someone out there was ready to provide it. Even if it had to be faked. You see, in this era, receipts are the new currency. Not facts. Not context. Just visuals. Screenshots. Blurry photos. A timestamp. Something. Anything that can be cropped, filtered, posted, and weaponized. So when SNL aired that joke, it wasn't just a punchline. It was a trigger. And within 24 hours, Yacht Girl photos were trending in 3 countries. But here's the catch. They weren't real. Not even close. The images that began circulating were AI manipulated, digitally enhanced, or pulled from unrelated luxury yacht events from over a decade ago. Blurry silhouettes. Glamorous women in sunglasses. A tan shoulder here. A raised champagne flute there. And yet, just enough resemblance to ignite speculation. You can't prove it's her. You can't prove it isn't her either. That's all it took. A whisper campaign revived from the digital dead. And the most ironic part? Colin Jost never claimed the images existed. He never said they were real. He never said Meghan did anything. He simply joked about the possibility. Because that's the genius of modern media. It doesn't need to say the thing. It only needs to imply the thing, so the audience can do the rest. So ask yourself, what's worse, saying something false or leading people to believe something false on their own? The moment those fake photos hit Twitter, they didn't come with disclaimers. There were no watermarks. No context. Just captions like, "Is this what Jost was talking about?" Suddenly that joke makes a lot of sense. She's been playing the long game all along. One photo even went viral with the caption, "Proof. Yacht life. Royal lies." But it wasn't Meghan. The woman in the image was a Brazilian model from a 2012 Cannes yacht party. Easily verifiable. Public record. But no one cared. Because the belief had already taken root. That's the terrifying power of suggestion. Now, to be fair, Meghan's legal team did care. Fiercely. By Monday morning, 2 separate entertainment blogs had been issued takedown notices for publishing doctored images under her name. A third outlet was reportedly threatened with a defamation suit. But again, it didn't matter. The images had already circulated. They had been screen recorded, cropped, republished. Thousands of TikTok creators began stitching the SNL clip with exposé breakdowns. Slow zooms, dramatic voiceovers, royalty-free suspense music. They questioned her career timeline. They linked her past friendships. They pulled photos from completely unrelated modeling campaigns. And somewhere, sitting in a room full of writers, Colin Jost probably smiled. Not out of cruelty, but because his point had been proven. You don't need the receipts. You only need people to want the receipts. That's the contradiction that turned the fire into an inferno. Think about it. Meghan's public image has always been built on dualities. The humanitarian, with Hollywood roots. The royal, who broke the rules. The victim, who controlled her narrative. The rebel, who demanded reverence. And contradictions make people curious. Addictive, even. So when a story breaks, no matter how absurd, no matter how baseless, people cling to it. Not because they believe it's true, but because they're desperate for the story to fill in the blanks. We've seen this before, haven't we? Think about other celebrity scandals. The kind that start with a vague tweet, an anonymous source, or a grainy image. It's not the content that creates the scandal, it's the vacuum of clarity. And Meghan's team, despite their experience, made a critical mistake. They responded. They issued a carefully worded statement late Sunday night, calling the joke a targeted attempt to dredge up falsehoods and an irresponsible abuse of platform influence. They urged NBC to do better. But that response, it didn't quash the rumor. It confirmed it mattered. To the public, her rebuttal sounded less like outrage and more like damage control. Because silence is mysterious. But defense? Defense smells like guilt. So the question is, what should she have done? Ignore it? Laugh it off? Confront Jost directly? Or was there simply no right move at all? Because once the internet decides you're guilty, even just of being interesting enough to speculate about, it doesn't matter what's true. Now let's shift to something even more complex, the emotional effect of the lie. Because while Meghan was publicly silent after her team's statement, insiders whispered that she was rattled, furious, devastated, not because of what was said, but because she understood what wasn't said, and how that silence was more devastating than any accusation. And here's where the story starts to metastasize. Some royal reporters, completely unrelated to the comedy sketch, began picking up the narrative. They started asking why this rumor was gaining traction now. Was it coordinated? A smear? Was it linked to the Duke of York's recent fall from grace? And then the lines blurred even further. Suddenly, online forums started linking Meghan and Andrew in ways that were neither ethical nor logical, but that felt narratively satisfying to audiences who already didn't like her. It went like this. If she's capable of orchestrating a royal exit, if she's comfortable playing with fame, if she's associated with wealthy elites, then what else is she capable of? That's how innuendo works. It turns possibility into probability. It takes rumor and turns it into reputation. But here's the punchline no one saw coming. This entire spiral was the joke, not the fabricated affair, not the photos, not the meltdown. The joke was on all of us. Colin Jost's monologue wasn't about Meghan. It was about how easily the public could be manipulated, about how hungry we are to believe in scandal, to chase salacious whispers, to click on things we know are fake, just because they're more entertaining than the truth. He didn't need to show proof. He didn't even need to write a sketch. He just needed to imply enough. And the audience did the rest. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? Realizing we may be complicit in the very character assassination we claim to condemn. Realizing that maybe, just maybe, we were the punchline all along. That's the tragedy of it. And the brilliance. Because in that single SNL moment, Colin Jost blurred the line between performance and reality. And what came next wasn't comedy. It was chaos. It starts with a whisper, a nudge, a smirk, a have you heard, passed along in comment sections, text threads, or over coffee between editors at rival tabloids. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to exist. Because in a world that breathes in speculation and exhales headlines, the truth is just the scaffolding we drape illusion over. So how does a rumor become a headline? And how does that headline become the kind of reality that can bury a reputation, even if it's entirely fiction? Let's break it down. Step 1. The seeding. You plant the seed with something that sounds just plausible enough. Meghan Markle was allegedly seen on a yacht in 2010. That's it. That's all it takes. You don't even need a source, just a timestamp and a setting. Monaco, Cannes, Ibiza, somewhere luxurious, somewhere exclusive, somewhere she could have been, whether she was or not doesn't matter. Then you let it sit. You let it stew. You let it linger in the digital ether. And because we're human, and we love filling in blanks, the public does the rest. Was she there? Who was she with? Why haven't we heard about this before? Boom. Interest is sparked. But interest alone isn't enough. So you move to step 2, the pattern. Now you give it context. You stitch together unrelated events to form a narrative. Meghan acted in Suits. Meghan went to Soho House. Meghan had wealthy friends. Meghan traveled. Meghan once dated a chef who knew people who knew people. These fragments are harmless on their own. But once you stack them, once you suggest they form a pattern, they begin to feel like proof. Not real proof, but emotional proof. Story proof. That's the most dangerous kind. Because it makes people say things like, well, it all adds up, doesn't it? I mean, look at the people she surrounded herself with. She's always had a plan. And just like that, you've blurred coincidence with conspiracy. You've turned an actress with a work visa into a Machiavellian social climber armed with yachts and secret backers. But you're still not done. You need the thing that takes it from conspiracy to clickbait. So you move to Step 3, the amplifier. This is where platforms like Saturday Night Live come into play. See, SNL didn't start the rumor, but it amplified it with one perfectly timed line. And in that moment, what had previously lived in the shadows of obscure gossip forums was now center stage in one of the most watched comedy shows in America. A single joke gave the rumor legitimacy, not because it was true, but because it existed in a place that gave it cultural weight. Late-night shows, sketch comedy, even memes. They are our modern-day printing press. They are where the average person gets their headlines, their context, their truths. So when Colin Jost made that joke, the message to millions wasn't "this is a lie." It was, "this is okay to talk about now." And once it's okay to talk about, Step 4, the headline. Now you have digital tabloids, social media gossip accounts, entertainment analysts, and pseudo-royal commentators all jumping into the fray. They don't say it happened. They say it's being speculated. A subtle trick. A weasel phrase. Rumors are swirling. Sources claim. Online chatter suggests. They're not reporting news. They're reporting that people are talking about it. But in a world addicted to scrolls and swipes, most readers don't make it past the headline. So if the headline says, Meghan's yacht days resurface after SNL bombshell, that becomes the reality in the reader's mind. Forget the context. Forget the denial. Forget the lack of evidence. Because you've already absorbed the premise. And in your brain, it sticks. Now you move to the final phase. Step 5, the memory hole. This is where things get truly cruel. Because after the dust settles, after the wave of hysteria dies down, after the SNL skit fades into rerun history, and Twitter moves on to its next target, the truth never resurfaces with the same force. No retraction will go as viral. No correction will trend. No, actually, this wasn't true, will make it into your feed. The rumor stays, lodged in collective memory like gum under a desk. Even if you don't believe it, a piece of you will always wonder. And that's what kills reputations in the 2020s. Not scandal. Suspicion. Now let's tie this directly to Meghan. Because whether you believe the rumors or not, the process remains the same. She became a symbol. A cipher for people's frustrations with fame, royalty, class, race, gender, media, power. Some people saw her as a survivor. Others saw her as a manipulator. But few saw her as human. That's the tragedy. And that's what Colin Jost exploited so ruthlessly with his joke. He didn't need to name the rumor. He only needed to name the possibility. And the public, us, we did the rest. But there's something else no one is talking about. Something darker. Because while the fake yacht photos and the whispered timelines were spinning across the internet, something else entered the conversation. A name that hadn't been linked to Meghan's image in any significant way before. Prince Andrew. And suddenly the narrative shifted. Not just was Meghan on a yacht, but who was with her? It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was character assassination. Now again, for clarity, this storyline is fictionalized. It's not based on verified fact. There is no credible evidence linking Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew in any way other than through their shared royal connection. But in this media universe, the association alone was enough. Because Andrew's name is poison. His scandals are real. His disgrace is public. His titles have been stripped. His reputation, irreparable. So to even suggest a link between him and Meghan, even as a joke, was to throw gasoline on an already burning fire. And for some viewers, that was all they needed to connect dots that were never there. It wasn't logical. It wasn't fair. But it was effective. Which begs the question. How do you fight a narrative that was never based on truth? Do you issue a statement? Do you lawyer up? Do you go on another Oprah-style tell-all and explain yourself again? Or do you go silent and let the public assume silence equals shame? It's a no-win situation. Because in today's world, perception is reality. And once your name is tied to scandal, even fictionally, you carry the weight of that suspicion forever. That's what Meghan faced in the aftermath of the joke. Not legal risk. Not reputational ruin. But something more insidious. Doubt. Doubt that spread like smoke. Invisible. Creeping. Hard to pin down. But always there. Lingering. And just when it seemed like the chaos would settle, just when Meghan's team began to quietly clean up the mess, another wave hit. Something no one, not even Colin Jost, saw coming. And it didn't come from the comedy world. It came from Parliament. And it had nothing to do with rumors or jokes. It was a very real decision, with very real consequences. And it would pull Andrew's name back into headlines in a way that threatened to drag Meghan's name with it all over again. It's easy to blame Colin Jost. Easy to look at his smirking face, perfectly timed sarcasm, and surgical delivery and say, that's the guy who started it all. But here's the truth no one wants to admit. Colin didn't invent the mockery. He didn't build the machine. He just knew exactly how to drive it. Because mocking the royals? That's a time-honored tradition, a ritual as old as the monarchy itself. British comedy shows have done it for decades. Spitting Image, have I got news for you? Blackadder, even Monty Python. The royals, in the UK, are both revered and ridiculed in equal measure. It's part of the cultural contract. But when that ridicule crosses the Atlantic and lands on American soil, the tone shifts. The gloves come off. The comedy doesn't just poke fun. It peels back layers, digs beneath the surface, and dances on the bones of public image. And Colin Jost? He's the maestro of that particular dance. He understood something very few people grasped. That in America, the monarchy isn't a sacred institution, it's a brand. And like any brand, it can be mocked, memed, and dismantled in 15 seconds of airtime. So when he walked into the writer's room that Tuesday afternoon before the now infamous SNL broadcast, he wasn't looking to destroy Meghan Markle. He wasn't hunting headlines or trying to trend. He was doing what comedians do best, finding the fault lines. And with Meghan, there were many. Contradictions. Polarizing choices. A strange push-pull relationship with fame. A persona both meticulously crafted and fiercely defended. To a comic's eye, that's gold. Let's back up. Jost had been watching the Sussex saga unfold for years. He saw the Oprah interview, the Netflix docuseries, the Spotify deal implosion. He saw Meghan transition from Duchess to media mogul, from royal rebel to podcast host, from survivor to aspirational lifestyle brand. And through it all, he saw one glaring truth, the gap between what was said and what was seen. She said she wanted privacy, yet she appeared on every platform. She claimed to step back from royal duties, yet kept the Duchess title. She distanced herself from the institution, yet monetized every detail of her time within it. And that, in comedy, is called irony. And irony, that's where the best jokes are born. Now let's be clear, Colin didn't hate Meghan. He didn't have a vendetta. In fact, some say he admired her hustle, her transformation, her ability to shape public perception. But admiration doesn't protect you from satire, especially not when the stakes are this high. The moment that infamous joke landed, it was more than comedy. It was commentary. Commentary on the royal obsession. Commentary on celebrity culture. Commentary on how easily the public consumes unverified narratives if they're entertaining enough. The brilliance of Jost's approach wasn't just in what he said, it was in how he said it. Deadpan, calm, casual. He wasn't screaming from the rooftop. He was whispering a loaded question directly into the national psyche. And the audience? They didn't even flinch. Because the line he delivered, linking a fictionalized yacht girl past with a disgraced royal uncle, wasn't outrageous in its wording. It was outrageous in its implications. And that's what made it stick. Now here's where it gets chilling. SNL, for all its chaotic energy, is tightly controlled. Scripts are vetted. Rehearsals are timed. Producers oversee every beat. And yet that line, that joke, it wasn't in the final script submitted to NBC standards and legal. It was added during the live taping. On air. Unrehearsed. Unvetted. Which means Jost knew exactly what he was doing. He slipped it in while everyone was watching. While the cameras were rolling. While the world was not ready. That's not a mistake. That's a masterclass in comedic timing and media manipulation. Because Colin didn't need NBC's approval. He needed Twitter's. And he got it. Within hours, the clip was trending. Fans called him brutal, savage, the only SNL host with guts. Critics called it disgusting, low, unfair. But everyone was talking about it. And in comedy, there's no greater victory than that. But let's zoom out. Why did the joke land so hard? Why did the public embrace it? Because whether people admit it or not, there's a lingering discomfort around Meghan's narrative. A cognitive dissonance that leaves many feeling like something doesn't quite add up. And Jost tapped into that unease. He gave voice to the things people were too afraid or too polite to say out loud. And that's always been the role of satire. To push, to poke, to provoke. But Jost didn't just provoke Meghan. He provoked the entire idea of untouchable royalty in the American media landscape. And he did it with one sentence. Now let's be honest. There was fallout. Behind the scenes, insiders claimed Meghan's PR team went into emergency containment mode. Emails were drafted. Publicists made calls. Legal threats were considered. NBC execs were reportedly blindsided by the unscripted line. But it was already too late. The clip was everywhere. It had transcended television. It had become culture. And Colin Jost? He didn't apologize. He didn't backpedal. He didn't even comment. Because he didn't have to. The joke was the comment. Now pause and ask yourself, where's the line? Where does comedy end and cruelty begin? Is it fair to target someone with rumors that were never proven? Or is it fair game when that someone has made millions telling their side of the story first? Does satire lose its power when it punches down? Or is it more powerful when it hits a nerve? These are the questions Jost left hanging in the air. Questions the public is still debating. And perhaps that was the most brilliant move of all. Because while people argued about the ethics of the joke, they weren't talking about the real problem. The rumor pipeline. The machinery that turns whispers into headlines. Headlines into reality. Reality into weaponized identity. That's the pipeline Colin Jost exposed. Not just Meghan's. Ours. And he did it with the one weapon the royal family has never truly understood. Unforgiving American satire. And it worked. It absolutely worked. But what no one expected, what caught even the most cynical media watchers off guard, was what happened next. Because while Meghan and Harry reeled from the fallout, while SNL raked in the ratings, while the public turned the punchline into an algorithmic storm, the real crown made a move. And it didn't involve a joke. It involved a name, a royal title, and a long-buried disgrace that refused to stay dead. The question seemed innocent enough. How do we make fun of Meghan without making fun of everything she represents? It echoed through the SNL writers' room in the days after the now infamous broadcast. Because while Colin Jost's joke had gone viral, had shattered ratings records, had ignited debates from California to Kensington, it also did something else. It struck a nerve not just in Meghan's camp, but across a nation still figuring out how to handle royalty in exile. Because make no mistake, mocking Meghan wasn't just about Meghan. It was about America's complicated relationship with the crown. The line between humor and humiliation, between satire and sabotage, between teasing a duchess and undermining a cultural identity wrapped in robes, titles, and a 1,000-year-old throne. So how do you roast a duchess without roasting a nation? It turns out, the answer is, you can't. Not completely. Because Meghan Markle isn't just a person anymore. She's a symbol, a lightning rod. A mirror that reflects our obsessions with class, race, ambition, feminism, monarchy, celebrity, and victimhood. Every joke about her is a Rorschach test. Some people see a spoiled elitist. Others see a battered survivor. Some see a social climber. Others see a bold revolutionary. And that's the problem. Because when you write comedy about her, you're not just writing about her. You're writing about the system that created her, the audience that amplified her, the press that praised her, and the nation that judged her. But Colin Jost didn't flinch from that. He leaned in. He understood that to roast a duchess properly, you had to do it surgically. No sweeping statements. No cruel stereotypes. Just one perfectly chosen line. One scalpel of sarcasm aimed directly at the contradiction no one else wanted to talk about. And that's exactly what he delivered. But here's where it gets complicated. Because while American audiences were largely divided, half cackling, half clutching their pearls, Britain was watching, too. And in the UK, the rules are different. Satirizing the royal family, there is like teasing a sacred animal. You can do it, but there's a way, a tone, a rhythm to it. It's cheeky, not cutting. Clever, not cruel. What Jost did, that wasn't British satire. That was American dissection. Blunt, daring, indifferent to the consequences. And the reaction from across the pond was telling. British tabloids feigned outrage. But secretly, they were thrilled. Because Jost's joke gave them permission. Permission to resurrect old narratives. To rehash old wounds. To revive the yacht girl rumor under the guise of SNL says it, not us. The Daily Mail, The Express, The Sun, they all ran pieces dissecting the joke. Some laughed, others condemned, but all of them printed it. And that's the power of comedy when it's targeted precisely. It spreads like a virus, through laughter, then outrage, then repetition. Until it doesn't matter what the intent was. It only matters that people are talking. But Meghan's team? They weren't laughing. Inside Montecito, sources claim the mood was bleak. She feels betrayed, one insider allegedly said. Everyone she thought would protect her either stayed silent or laughed. She's realizing the American media isn't her friend. And in a strange twist of irony, Meghan, who had once fled the UK to escape the tabloid storm, was now being re-dragged into the fire by her adopted home country. All because of a joke. So again, we ask, how do you roast a duchess without roasting a nation? You don't. Because the duchess is the nation. Not literally, not politically, but symbolically. She's the embodiment of how America sees itself in relation to power. We love the idea of challenging monarchy, but we also love royalty. We celebrate independence, but we obsess over British traditions. We love underdogs, but we worship status. We cheer for authenticity, but we reward performance. And Meghan's story touches every one of those contradictions. So when she becomes the punchline, so does everything she represents. And here's the twist Jost likely understood before anyone else. He wasn't just mocking Meghan. He was mocking us. Our gullibility. Our hunger for scandal. Our willingness to treat rumors like currency. Our inability to distinguish between celebrity and nobility. Our willingness to project everything onto a woman we'll never meet. In one joke, he held up a mirror. And it made people laugh. But it also made them angry. Because no one likes to be reminded that maybe the problem isn't just her. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's the system we've built. Where gossip is power. Where scandal sells. Where the truth is less important than the aesthetic of truth. And in that system, there are no clean punches. Only bruises. Only broken narratives. Only collateral damage. And the damage? It was just beginning. Because while Meghan tried to claw her image back from the edge, something else began bubbling beneath the surface. Something older, more sinister, a name no one wanted to hear again. And this time, it wouldn't be delivered as a punchline. It would be delivered as policy. Because back in Britain, the monarchy had made a decision. And it had nothing to do with comedy. It had to do with finality, an erasure, and stripping away something that could never be taken back. A title, a name, a legacy. And in doing so, they would reopen wounds that Meghan thought she had escaped forever. Power is a curious thing. It hides in robes, in titles, in press briefings, in carefully worded palace statements printed in embossed stationery. But in the world of media, power doesn't wear a crown. It doesn't need gold-framed portraits or ancient ceremonies. It wears a lapel mic, stands on a stage, and knows exactly where to place a pause for maximum devastation. In the days following the SNL monologue that torched Meghan's reputation with one line, two things became abundantly clear. First, Colin Jost had launched a cultural grenade. And second, the ripple was being felt in places that comedy was never meant to reach. Because while Meghan and Harry scrambled behind Montecito walls, and the tabloids tried to ride the wave without getting scorched, the real storm was building in London. Not in the gossip columns. Not in the streets. But within the very institution Meghan had tried so hard to leave behind. The palace. And the palace, for all its centuries of power and poise, fears only one thing: uncontrolled narrative. They can handle scandal. They've survived affairs, divorces, wartime abdications. They've handled Nazi sympathizers and phone hacking. They've weathered Andrew. They even survived Diana. But what they can't control: American comedy. Because British institutions are built on the unspoken, on quiet suffering, on discretion, silence, and dignified removal. So when SNL cracked that joke, when Jost dropped the yacht line, the Andrew jab, the smirk that suggested far more than he actually said, something shifted. It wasn't just scandalous. It was improper. Not because it mocked Meghan, but because it mocked the system. And to the palace, that's unacceptable. But here's where it gets twisted. The palace didn't respond publicly. Of course not. That's not how they operate. They don't tweet. They don't call press conferences. They don't send cease and desists. They wait, and they whisper. And in those whispers, behind thick oak doors in Kensington and Buckingham and Sandringham, there was one name that resurfaced. One ghost they had tried desperately to bury. Andrew. Because the joke that started as an attack on Meghan didn't stay there. It mutated. It infected Andrew's name again, dragged him back into the headlines, reawakened the public's disgust with a man they were trying very, very hard to forget. And suddenly, what should have been a months-old story, his royal title stripped, his public roles erased, was back on every broadcast. Prince Andrew's disgrace referenced in American satire. SNL reignites debate over royal accountability. Public calls for further action grow louder. The palace didn't want that. They wanted Andrew quietly erased, not re-examined. And that's when the fear kicked in. Because Jost didn't just hit Meghan. He cracked open the vault they sealed shut. But here's the most fascinating part. Colin Jost. He didn't blink. When journalists called his reps, asking for statements, clarification, follow-ups, he declined. When Meghan's PR team allegedly reached out through back channels. Nothing. No walk back. No apology. No offhand, it was just a joke. Why? Because for the first time, perhaps in years, a mainstream American comic had reminded the world of something powerful. Freedom of speech doesn't kneel. Not to Hollywood. Not to royalty. And not to the palace. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't petty. He was strategic. But even the most strategic player can't always control what happens next. Because just when Jost believed the storm was over, just when he thought the blowback had faded into meme territory, he received a message, a whisper of his own, from a contact inside the industry, someone connected to the UK press. A tip, an internal royal memo had been leaked. The content, that an emergency roundtable had been called regarding Andrew's lingering ties to family property holdings, honorary military affiliations, and residual public perks still tied to his previous position. It had nothing to do with Meghan. It had everything to do with optics. And the timing? Too perfect to be coincidence. Colin Jost's joke didn't just go viral. It forced the Crown to act. Because now, people weren't just laughing at Meghan. They were remembering Andrew. His scandal. His settlements. His silence. They were asking, if he's out, why does he still have access to this? Why is he still protected? Why isn't more being done? And once those questions start circulating, the monarchy must respond. So here's the twist no one saw coming. Jost had unwittingly reignited the fire under Andrew, and in doing so, dragged Meghan right back into it. Because now, the public narrative was distorted. People began conflating the two figures. Whispers turned into headlines. Two royals. Two scandals. One joke that exposed everything. SNL joke triggers parliamentary review of royal titles. Is Meghan being punished for Andrew's sins? It didn't matter that the joke was fictionalized satire. The implication was too potent to ignore. But Jost didn't flinch. Because if there's one thing he knew better than anyone, it's that once you tell the joke, you can't apologize for the laugh. You own it. And he did. Until something unexpected happened. One of his upcoming appearances, a comedy roundtable at a major festival, was suddenly postponed due to scheduling conflicts. A rumor began circulating that a certain Hollywood PR team had applied pressure to have him dropped. Another show booking was reconsidered. Suddenly, a few SNL alumni stopped responding to messages. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, but subtle shifts, quiet snubs, the kind of movements that don't scream controversy, but whisper consequences. It's the Hollywood version of court politics. And Jost, for the first time, he felt it. Not fear, not regret, but pressure. Because when you go after power, power often finds a way to press back. The palace wasn't going to sue him. They weren't going to challenge the joke. But the system? The constellation of agents, producers, networks, image consultants, and donors? They could make life complicated, especially for someone who poked too hard at the royal bruise. Jost wasn't scared. Not exactly. But he wasn't untouchable either. And deep down, he knew the next time he told a joke about royalty, it might not come with applause. It might come with a price. And as he stood backstage days later, staring at his reflection in the mirror before a panel interview, he asked himself something no comic ever wants to consider. Was the laugh worth it? But before he could answer, his phone buzzed. Another headline. This one even worse than the last. Not about him. About Meghan. And the fallout wasn't fiction anymore. It was personal. In the United Kingdom, titles are everything. They don't just signify lineage, they bestow legacy, authority, public deference. From dukes and duchesses to viscounts and earls, every title tells a story of heritage, honor, or, sometimes, embarrassment. And when the monarchy takes one away, it's never casual. It's a statement, a warning, a silencing. But America? America doesn't care about your title. You could be a duchess, a countess, a queen. On this side of the Atlantic, your crown means nothing if your story doesn't hold up under the harsh white lights of a late-night studio or the glare of a TMZ lens. And in a country where satire reigns louder than protocol, the monarchy has no special shield, which is exactly what Meghan forgot. Because in America, you can't be stripped of your royal title by law, but you can be stripped of something much more fragile, your dignity. And on live television, broadcast from 30 Rockefeller Plaza on a Saturday night, that's exactly what happened. It wasn't just Colin Jost's joke. It was what followed. The ripple effect, the social commentary, the viral memes, the podcast episodes dissecting the timing, the tone, the implications. And the worst part? The laughter. Not polite chuckles, not nervous titters, but real, belly-deep laughter from people who had once cheered for her. Because the joke, while sharp, didn't feel like cruelty at first. It felt like permission. Permission for the public to say what they'd been holding back for years. That maybe the fairy tale wasn't real. That maybe the escape from the palace wasn't brave, it was calculated. That maybe Meghan wasn't the heroine of the story she'd told. And once that dam burst, there was no going back. No interview could fix it. No article could reframe it. Because dignity, once cracked, doesn't make a sound. It just leaks. So let's rewind to what was happening behind the scenes. Following the SNL broadcast, Meghan's team had gone into what insiders called crisis freeze. Not panic, not spin, just pause. Because they understood something devastating. To respond would give the joke power. But to remain silent? That gave it credibility. So they did neither. They waited. And the world kept laughing. By Tuesday morning, a side-by-side photo comparison was trending on TikTok. On the left, Meghan at her royal wedding, radiant in Givenchy. On the right, a blurred photo of a brunette in a bikini on a yacht deck, wine glass in hand. Clearly not Meghan, but edited just enough to stir confusion. The caption? A duchess by day, and the video had 4.5 million views by sundown. No verification, no disclaimer, just vibes, and a soundtrack of irony. Another clip surfaced showing a montage of SNL's jokes spliced with out-of-context clips from Meghan's Oprah interview. Every line she'd once used to express her pain was now a punchline. I just wanted to be heard. Pukin laughter. They didn't protect me. Smash cut to Colin smirking into the camera. This wasn't just mockery. It was unmaking. The kind of viral content designed not to question, but to undo someone's narrative at the seams. And Meghan? She was unraveling. Not publicly, not in a statement or a breakdown, but privately, emotionally, among the people closest to her. Insiders claimed she canceled a Zoom meeting scheduled with a luxury wellness brand, postponed a podcast launch, avoided the Montecito coffee shop she once frequented with Harry. She was recoiling, not from the joke itself, but from what it unleashed. Because here's the contradiction that stings the most. She had come to America to escape this very thing. To find peace, healing, dignity, to control her own narrative. But the minute she stepped onto American soil, she entered the only battlefield more brutal than the British press. American satire. The UK media may bite, but it does so with gloves, behind headlines and royal correspondence. But American comedy? It doesn't flinch. It doesn't ask permission. And more importantly, it doesn't forget. Jokes here are archived, GIF-ed quoted, screen printed on t-shirts, baked into culture. They become a permanent tattoo on someone's reputation. And Meghan's? It had just been branded. Now let's step back and look at the real loss. Because this wasn't about losing a literal title. She was still the Duchess of Sussex by law. No one in the U.S. government could strip her of that. No act of Congress could pass a motion to unduchess her. But in the court of public opinion, she lost the one thing a title can never guarantee, credibility. And once that's gone, so is dignity. And with it, platform. Because the offers slow down. The invitations get awkward. The partnerships suddenly need review. And while the press may still mention your name, they do so with an asterisk. So Meghan, for the first time in a long time, went quiet. Not the curated silence of a PR strategy, but the raw, wounded quiet of someone who's realizing they've lost control. Meanwhile, Harry was growing angrier by the day. Not at Colin Jost, not at SNL, but at the institution that had allowed this to happen. The silence from Buckingham. The lack of support from royal aides. Even as an outsider, he still expected the palace to enforce some invisible boundary, some line of respect, even for the exiled. But the firm? It said nothing. Because the firm understood something Meghan and Harry were only just beginning to accept. When you leave the system, you leave the shield. There is no protection, no diplomacy, no correction letters. You're just another celebrity now. And celebrities? They're fair game. So as Meghan sat in silence and Harry raged at the void, across the ocean something else was brewing. Parliament. A follow-up motion. A call for transparency regarding financial entitlements and security arrangements for former working royals. It was buried deep in the legislative calendar, but insiders knew exactly what it meant. More scrutiny on Andrew. A possible review of property access. A closer look at how far his privileges truly extended. And the fact that this came right after an American joke? It wasn't coincidence. It was a chain reaction. Colin Jost lit the match, and now the monarchy had to deal with the smoke. But while Andrew was the intended target of this motion, Meghan's name surfaced again. In parliamentary whispers, in tabloid commentary, in online debate. Not because she was involved, but because she was now adjacent to scandal. And adjacency, in this climate, is everything. So let's be brutally honest. Meghan wasn't being punished for what she did. She was being punished for what people believed she could have done. And that's the cruelest reality of all. Because once a joke strips away your dignity, the audience doesn't just laugh at the punchline. They question every word you ever said before it. Every tear, every interview, every motive. And just when it seemed the worst was behind her, someone leaked the next SNL script. And it wasn't over. Not even close. It wasn't the joke that lit the match. It was what followed. The moment Colin Jost uttered the words Yacht phase and uncle named Andrew, a million tabs opened across the internet. Reddit threads reawakened. TikTok sleuths scrambled to dig through digital archives. And in dark corners of the web where conspiracy and celebrity obsession merge, something started to bubble. People wanted proof. Any proof. And that's where things got dangerous. Because someone out there was ready to provide it. Even if it had to be faked. You see, in this era, receipts are the new currency. Not facts. Not context. Just visuals. Screenshots. Blurry photos. A timestamp. Something. Anything that can be cropped, filtered, posted, and weaponized. So when SNL aired that joke, it wasn't just a punchline. It was a trigger. And within 24 hours, Yacht Girl photos were trending in 3 countries. But here's the catch. They weren't real. Not even close. The images that began circulating were AI manipulated, digitally enhanced, or pulled from unrelated luxury yacht events from over a decade ago. Blurry silhouettes. Glamorous women in sunglasses. A tan shoulder here. A raised champagne flute there. And yet, just enough resemblance to ignite speculation. You can't prove it's her. You can't prove it isn't her either. That's all it took. A whisper campaign revived from the digital dead. And the most ironic part? Colin Jost never claimed the images existed. He never said they were real. He never said Meghan did anything. He simply joked about the possibility. Because that's the genius of modern media. It doesn't need to say the thing. It only needs to imply the thing, so the audience can do the rest. So ask yourself, what's worse, saying something false or leading people to believe something false on their own? The moment those fake photos hit Twitter, they didn't come with disclaimers. There were no watermarks. No context. Just captions like, "Is this what Jost was talking about?" Suddenly that joke makes a lot of sense. She's been playing the long game all along. One photo even went viral with the caption, "Proof. Yacht life. Royal lies." But it wasn't Meghan. The woman in the image was a Brazilian model from a 2012 yacht party. Easily verifiable. Public record. But no one cared. Because the belief had already taken root. That's the terrifying power of suggestion. Now, to be fair, Meghan's legal team did care. fiercely. By Monday morning, two separate entertainment blogs had been issued takedown notices for publishing doctored images under her name. A third outlet was reportedly threatened with a defamation suit. But again, it didn't matter. The images had already circulated. They had been screen recorded, cropped, republished. Thousands of TikTok creators began stitching the SNL clip with expose breakdowns. Slow zooms, dramatic voiceovers, royalty